Robin, thanks so much for your time. So you're looking at business opportunities on the continent. Perhaps can you share what some of those are that were highlighted by your members in attendance?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Fifi, for having me here. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk about how we basically focused on Africa as a continent of opportunity. So we gathered about 600 businesses and World Trade Centers from around the world, virtually for our General Assembly, and also an artificial intelligence powered business-to-business matchmaking event. So the themes that we drove home was really, we had senior representation from the African Development Bank, really focusing on a critical issue, which is access to funding for mainly small and medium enterprises. And so it's maybe important to mention that our World Trade Centers, the constituents, the business partners, are by far and large small and medium enterprises all around the world. So we're active in nearly 100 countries. So from that conversation, we came really the topic of agriculture. And your colleague just earlier in the show already mentioned the World Bank report on the issue of food insecurity. So we really discussed into much more detail the opportunities for companies within Africa, but also from elsewhere in the world to grow the food markets, the agriculture sector in Africa. So that was a very important component. Second, we also had experts to talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is also a very, I think, important initiative that is little known around the world. So it's very important to provide information and education on that topic as well. And then, of course, we also had our key World Trade Centers from Africa in a discussion to talk about how can we grow as small, medium enterprises, how can we support intra-African trade, how can we develop more intra-African trade with these small and medium enterprises. And we also talked about the perception that still exists around the world about doing business in Africa. So we let our World Trade Centers from Algeria, from Ivory Coast, Ghana, Mauritius, Nigeria, speak for themselves about how it is like to do business in their respective countries. So this was our gathering here this week.
And how different was that perception of doing business on the continent from the reality that was shared by some of your member businesses? I'm just interested in how different that gap was.
Yeah, well, the perception is people talk about their own business environment, and it was not about let's talk about why things are difficult. Let's talk about how easy it actually is to do business in many African countries. So, and each of the panelists and members discussed how the situation is in their respective countries, and about the opportunity that there is. And so the discussion was then again perception. We talk about food insecurity, and then there's hunger. But then let's look at the numbers. There's the food market in Africa is about $750 billion. And it's expected to grow about 6% per year, which is double the growth rate in the global markets. This is, of course, you have a growing population, you have an urbanization, but these numbers in itself show what the opportunity here is. Mm-hmm. And the discussion that led to the fact that the vast majority of the food is sourced domestically. So there's an opportunity for that inter-African trade. But then also the vast majority of the producers are small, medium enterprises and farmers. So how can we all work together to allow these companies to grow and to scale up? Hence the discussion about access to, it's not just about only access to financing, it's also a lot of other factors. So it was really about the opportunity. How can we make that happen? And how can these World Trade Centers across Africa, but also plugged into the 300 other World Trade Centers around the world, connect and really create a very different dynamic. And again, the education, I think the information aspect is very important. We just mentioned the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It's a phenomenal initiative, and it's very little known. So again, bringing that to a global audience is absolutely important here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the second time you mentioned the fact that there's not a lot of awareness around the AfCFTA. around the world. But I'm interested in the areas in which there is awareness of this policy tool that aims to boost the level of trade happening on the continent, particularly trade happening amongst member countries on the continent. In those areas where there is awareness, are you able to speak to the level of uptake that there has been so far in actually trading under this policy framework?
Well, we have not seen that as much, and this is where the World Trade Centers are absolutely critical, because they in each in their own right represent hundreds and sometimes thousands of small and medium enterprises. So it's actually the connectivity of those World Trade Centers where things starting to happen. So this is, yes, the policies are in place. We can discuss whether the legal frameworks are there, the government support, infrastructure, all those questions. But the conversations that we provide within our global network is really going from one World Trade Center to another, and each representing a network of small and medium enterprises. Our World Trade Center in Abidjan, as an example, in Ivory Coast, is the largest employers organization of West Africa. So what they bring to the table, how they project the opportunity in Africa through our global network, is absolutely critical.
On the issue that did come up, particularly for small businesses in terms of their difficulty in accessing finance, either to get going or to scale up. I mean, I think that this is a challenge that's quite commonly listed in terms of doing business as a small to medium enterprise particularly. What solutions were put on the table on this front in terms of improving the ease of access to funding for SMEs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very good question, and that's the, as we say, the $1 million question here. Figures from the Africa Development Bank show that only 10% of small enterprises actually make it to a medium-sized enterprise, and only 1% of companies then makes it to what would be defined as a larger enterprise. So we found that also that there's the African Development Bank, as an example, has many resources, great resources, and then you see that the share of commercial funding, commercial financing from commercial banks to business in Africa is very low. And there's a lot of reasons why this is low. High interest rates, a lot of red tape, a lot of procedures in place, a lot of difficult questions about collateral. So the Africa Development Bank, again, has a very important role to play. And it's then always surprising to see how little known it is to, especially then small and medium enterprises, what exactly it is that the African Development Bank can provide. How do they get access to their support for letters of credit, for just basic funding needs? So there's I think a huge need for more information and to reach the potential recipients directly. And this is again where the World Trade Centers come in, because our World Trade Centers will take this then directly to their business partners, those small and medium enterprises, and we're going to try to coordinate that on the continental level within Africa. But it's not just for Africa; it's also for companies outside of Africa that are looking to do business in Africa, to provide information, education. How can you get access to the market? How can you get funding? How can you team up with African companies to create new initiatives?
You mentioned agriculture as an area of interest that did come up, or that has come up throughout discussions so far this week. Any other areas of interest on the continent where we could see perhaps increased trade activity as a result of this level of interest? Then perhaps where's it coming from?
That's a good question, Fifi. If you look at the share of trade for Africa in global trade, it's less than 3%. I think it's about 2.6%. So the only way is up. That share of global trade can of course only grow. We spoke about agriculture. I think an enormous opportunity there. But then there's also a whole range of services, right? There is opportunities in no doubt in tourism. And other type of services related to technology. You see a lot of Africa-born technology companies getting started and being very successful. So I think in the services area as well, the share of the economy that comes from services is also very much under-indexing compared to the rest of the world. So I think services as a whole, with a focus on tourism, has an enormous potential.
Mm-hmm. I mean, COVID-19 has made trade for quite a number of companies quite difficult, right? Because of the supply chain issues it has introduced, which have had a knock-on effect on costs, if you look at freight costs and shipping costs and all other costs involved in the trade process. Can you share perhaps what was discussed regarding supply chain bottlenecks amongst some companies when they saw that being filtered out of the system, and perhaps any assistance required for the supply chain and the pressures on the supply chain to be eased?
That is a very important question. We did not sort of drill down on the question of supply chain here. I think we're all aware of the bottlenecks and the multiple factors that impact the supply chain. I just saw, I believe, with the previous speaker, the question on the mining side that post-COVID, a lot of people just don't show up with the absenteeism. You see this from the factory level in Asia to the ports of Los Angeles, where there's just a lack of people. Prices going up, inflation is going through the roof in so many countries. So I think we're in the middle of a bit of a perfect storm, where also governments around the world have poured in enormous amounts of money, liquidity in the markets during the pandemic, and that is also a very distorting element here. But we're definitely not out of the woods yet with supply chains, especially at the global level. I think we will see a lot more what we call nearshoring, right, where factories are dependent from basic goods from elsewhere in the world, and without some of the basic components, the factory basically has to shut down. So many companies around the world are, for supply chain reasons alone, for efficiency reasons alone, looking at nearshoring. So then if you look, to come back to your previous question, Fifi, on opportunities for Africa, I think Africa is in a geostrategic place to actually support both the Asian markets, European markets from a nearshoring perspective. So there's definitely opportunity there as well. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, if that really then comes to maturity and implemented with the necessary support for infrastructure, could create a great gateway to other markets for even for manufacturing in parts of Africa.